I'm the Gaming Grappler, and for today's video, I'm going to be breaking down all the hype as hell matchups that Michael Venom Page can finally take part in now that he's joined the UFC. And for those that are completely unaware, MVP made his debut on UFC 299 Sugar Sean O'Malley versus Marlon Chito Vera, and he did it in stylish fashion against Kevin Trailblazer Holland. Now, before I get this analysis started, I just want to explain what in the hell you're even looking at on screen here. What I have is all the relevant fights at welterweight. Above all these fighters here, I have their ranking in the roster, and below 5 of them, you'll notice a number. That's their age. You see, there was this really fantastic video by MMA On Point that broke down that on statistical average, most fighters will hit their prime in their late 20s and early 30s, but they'll start to go on a downward slump around the age of 34. Any fighter over the age of 34 is going to struggle to become champion, and MVP is 36 years old. Now, I don't necessarily believe that MVP is even here to get a title shot. Although there is a pathway to get him there, it wouldn't be the craziest thing in the world. It isn't unusual for the UFC to give fighters outside of the organization a fast track to the title shot. It happened with Alex Pereira not once, but twice. It happened with Michael Chandler, and I could definitely see that happening to MVP. And there's definitely a through line of guys he can beat that can give him that easy title shot. I don't know if he'll beat Leon Edwards. I kind of feel like Leon Edwards has the edge there, but it can definitely happen. I kind of feel that MVP is here for fun, for action, kind of like how we don't necessarily believe that Michael Chandler will win his fights, but he'll give us a show. And Kevin Holland was a really good litmus test to see how well MVP skills would translate to the UFC. Let's face it here, MVP kind of has a mixed reputation. On the one hand, I would argue that he's one of the most stylish and dynamic strikers in existence, period. He has one of the most legendary knockout highlight reels in human existence. But a lot of people would diminish that by saying that he got those knockouts on complete tomato cans. Like, look at Cyborg Santos. Well, Cyborg Santos was a great fighter in his prime. MVP broke that guy's skull when he was in his 40s. Like, this guy shouldn't have been retired. And in that regard, it's completely tragic that that move basically retired him. So there was definitely a lot of questions that need to be answered. And to be fair to MVP, towards the end of his career in Bellator, he did start getting tougher matchups and even took a few L's along the way. And MVP fighting Kevin Holland is a really interesting matchup. Kevin's still in his prime. He's 31 years old. He has the similar height and reach to MVP. Both Kevin Holland and MVP are 6'3". They have a similar range. They're both primarily strikers. And Kevin Holland is kind of this jack of all trades and master of few. Let me explain. He's a good striker, but not a great striker. Like, his striking technique was definitely exposed by Wonderboy, who also has a similar fighting style to MVP. More on that later, but his striking was exposed. He's kind of carried by his powerful right hand. Marvin Cementhead Vittori has been on record saying that Kevin Holland is the strongest puncher he's ever gone up against. And Marvin's main redeeming feature is that he has a granite chin. While Kevin Holland does have good jiu-jitsu, he doesn't have the wrestling to facilitate that jiu-jitsu. He has a real difficult time bringing his opponent to the ground. So we have a younger guy who has a similar build to MVP that is forced to engage with MVP on his terms. So what did we learn from the fight? We learned that MVP still has it, at least in terms of striking. MVP is still incredibly fast and incredibly powerful. As a matter of fact, just seeing him jump around the octagon, the guy looks like a cartoon character. And he definitely embarrassed Kevin Holland on the feet. Now, where his age is starting to show, where MVP is starting to look older, is in his grappling defense. Kevin Holland, like I mentioned earlier, doesn't have good wrestling. Again, he struggles on the defensive side and on the offensive side. And he was able to get MVP on the ground and get some significant ground time in the second round, and he secured that round definitely. So what does that mean for MVP in the UFC? What that means is that for the most fun and interesting matchups for this guy, we don't want to have him fight any wrestlers. You see this at the bottom of the screen? This is the wrestler zone. We don't go here. We don't want him to fight anybody at the bottom of the screen here. Now, you could argue that, hey, MVP is the same age as Kamaru Usman, Colby Covington, Gilbert Burns is a year older than him. But even then, I still wouldn't have him match up against those guys because all three of those guys want to become champion, and they would lame it out against MVP. They would do the lamest form of grappling. Like, the last thing we want to see happen is see somebody like Belal Muhammad, who is a good fighter, but man, Belal Muhammad is the most boring fighter in human history. Like, I would not pay a cent to see this guy main event anything. Belal Muhammad basically has the most boring grappler metagame in existence. He will hit you with the lamest jabs imaginable. He will secure a takedown, and he won't even get a good position. Like, he'll be stuck in a guy's guard, nipples to nipples, just doing the bare amount of damage necessary to prevent the ref from standing up. And this is from a guy called the Gaming Grappler. Grappling is by far my favorite martial art. I love judo, jiu-jitsu, and wrestling. My favorite fighters are guys like Islam Makhachev, Charles Oliveira. The list goes on, but what Belal Muhammad doesn't have in common with those guys is that he's boring, and I don't want to pay money to see him. So again, we don't want to see MVP fight anybody that's even halfway competent at wrestling. It just isn't going to happen. Do not make him fight somebody like Shavkat. Shavkat's entertaining, but you'll just kill him, and there's no fun in that. So you might be tempted to say, why don't we have him fight Wonderboy? They both have a similar fighting style. They're both karate guys. They both use that wide stance with their hands towards the hips so they can get weird angles. They're both world-class strikers. Why don't we actually want to see that? Well, MVP has been on record in an interview with Ariel Helwani, where he basically broke down and said that it would be a boring matchup. They're both counter strikers. There would be basically 15 to 25 minutes of guys fainting and not much happening. It would look like a LARP. It would look like two people pretending to be wizards throwing lightning bolts at each other. And that's basically what MVP said. These guys are also friends in real life. Like, I've seen MVP on Stephen Wonderboy Thompson's YouTube channel. So they've probably sparred before, and they probably basically confirmed that that's what it would look like. So Wonderboy probably wouldn't be that interesting of a matchup, and we probably don't actually want to see it. Like MVP said in his interview, 2 pluses don't necessarily equal a good fight. They would just be fainting at each other for 25 minutes, and you actually don't want to see this. He's completely convinced me. I do think, however, that the UFC is going to try to make this fight because everybody's been kind of asking for it. So let's just say they do fight. How would it go? I do think that MVP at this point in his career is basically a younger version of Wonderboy that has more speed and more power. Now, you could say that Wonderboy has faced significantly higher levels of competition throughout the duration of his career, and that he would level the playing field with his technique. But at the age of 41, he's really over the hill at this point. I don't think he has the speed and the power to facilitate that technique, and I feel like he's going to make a lot of mistakes. But we can use Wonderboy as a litmus test to see who MVP would be good up against. And one person he would be really good up against is Vicente Luque. Vicente Luque is a young guy. Again, he's in his early 30s. He hasn't passed that 34 age mark. And Vicente Luque is primarily a striker. He does have some submission victories, but he usually used his striking to facilitate that grappling game. And what makes this a good matchup is that Vicente Luque is a meathead striker. Like, he'll take a lot of damage to give damage. And he's kind of this guy that will charge on forward and try to land a power shot. These are the type of people that MVP does the best against. He loves strikers who are meatheaded, that charge forward. It really does the best to facilitate the best aspects of his moveset. If you want to see him throw no-look elbows like he did against Kevin Holland and do a stylish knockout, Vicente Luque is the guy that has the chin to basically test MVP skills at the highest level. He's younger, so it'll definitely be an entertaining fight. There will be a lot of blood and a lot of chaos. Again, Vicente Luque versus Michael Venom Page just feels like it should happen. We kind of seen a trial run of what that would be like when Wonderboy fought him, and it would be even more entertaining with MVP's dynamicism, seeing him style all over him in the cage. Like, this is definitely a fight that I think that MVP is favored to win. It also on the rankings makes sense. Like, number 13 fighting number 11 is kind of fair and balanced if you want to argue that. And then it leads him to another interesting fight. I am not a fan of Ian Machado Garry. Like, I don't feel like that's an entertaining fighter in the slightest, but I definitely feel like MVP would school him on the feet. Like, again, Ian here is primarily a striker, and most of the strikers on this list don't have anything on MVP. I think that you could have this fight in London. It kind of sells and markets itself. Again, if you want to see Machado Garry get clowned on for 3 rounds, I do think that MVP is definitely stylistically a good matchup. As long as you're not a wrestler, you're not going to beat him. So that's another matchup you can make. But here's another crazy matchup. So if you really want to fast track MVP to the title, you have him fight number 5 ranked Jack Della Maddalena. And I am doing some MMA math here because Jack had a really close fight with Kevin Holland. It was a very close fight. Jack just kind of slightly edged him out on the scorecard. But again, these two guys right here were very evenly matched, and MVP completely schooled Kevin Holland in the striking regard. So I kind of feel like based on that alone, and again, we are doing MMA math here, but Jack is primarily a striker. I don't feel like he has a good ground game to neutralize MVP. We saw that with Gilbert Burns. Now, while Gilbert Burns did lose the fight, Gilbert was pretty much ragdolling Jack and getting a significant amount of ground time before he unfortunately ate a knee to the face and got knocked the F out. But again, the grappling defense isn't there, which gives me a suggestion that his grappling offense isn't there. I kind of feel that both grappling defense and offense are intrinsically linked. Like, to have a good grappling defense, you kind of have to think how you would offensively use your grappling and kind of make predictions from there on out. So I kind of feel like Jack wouldn't be able to neutralize MVP with a good ground game. I kind of feel like MVP has a really good shot. This would be a really tough matchup, by the way, because again, Jack is more fundamentally sound than Kevin Holland, so it wouldn't just be free money for MVP, but it would be a tough matchup, and it would give MVP an opportunity to style on Jack. It would be close, but I do see MVP having a good shot at beating Jack here. Again, I might be crazy for saying that, considering that, again, Jack is like, what? He's ranked number 5th. He's in his late 20s. So again, he's going to have an edge there. But again, MVP is a fantastic 36-year-old guy. Like, this guy is still cartoonishly fast and powerful for his age. So I do see him beating, especially if grappling isn't a factor. And then you can be crazy and give him the title shot fight. Now, what I find entertaining here is that Leon Edwards is pretty much the only striker on this list here that probably outclasses MVP. He's more fundamentally sound. He has a better game plan. He could probably exploit a lot of MVP's weaknesses. Again, MVP stands in that wide karate stance, and I feel like Leon Edwards would be the guy to kick his legs out. They both have a similar height and build, so again, MVP has no real advantages over Leon Edwards. And Leon Edwards also has good grappling in his back pocket. We saw in his recent fight against Colby Covington where Leon just completely out-grappled him and out-striked him and just completely defeated the guy in every aspect. Now, we could say that at this point in his career, Colby Covington is completely washed. Like, he's not the same guy who fought Kamaru Usman twice and put on an entertaining performance. But also, in his fight against Kamaru Usman, Leon Edwards, when he fought Kamaru Usman, in the first fight where he was primarily losing before he got that knockout kick, there was one round in that fight where Leon Edwards actually reversed a takedown by Kamaru Usman, and he got on his back, and he basically won the round by having control time on his back the entire time. So again, Leon Edwards also has very good, very underrated trips, sweeps, and takedowns. So there's definitely a possibility that Leon could trip MVP, get some ground control time, and beat him like that. So I definitely feel like Leon Edwards kind of dwarfs MVP in skill and ability, but it would still be a highly entertaining fight. It wouldn't be a lame matchup. Like, it would be very entertaining. You could have this fight in the O2 Arena in London. The crowd would be popping. Like, both of these guys, both of these Englishmen would put on a show. And I kind of feel like even though MVP would be losing that fight, it would still be highly entertaining and fun to watch. Again, a championship with these two guys fighting would be great. So with that being said, let me know what you think about these matchups in the comments. I'm the Gaming Grappler. Please like, comment, and subscribe to this channel, and I'll see you next time, everybody.